Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. This is just a brief little talk that I wanted to go over, inshallah, just for the people, mainly for YouTube, for Telegram, dealing with the characteristics of a student, a real student of knowledge. Because a lot of people, they like to make that speech where they say, I'm a student of knowledge, and it's become such a common terminology that unfortunately a lot of the almost now we have to start like a stolen valor type thing for students of knowledge, just like like the military people have for people who impersonate military just to get some type of honor of like serving for their country or whatever garbage they serve for. But Allahumma musta'an. But you get the same type of thing now amongst people where they just they might have gone out and studied for like a year or two, and then they come back and it's like student knowledge, I'm student knowledge, and they love to use this terminology. But what we want to look at is like what are the characteristics, like the actual characteristics to know, because obviously like being a student of knowledge is not something like generally that you're going to have something to show for, like a piece of. I mean, most students of knowledge that go out and study that really seek knowledge for the right purposes, they're not studying for a piece of paper. So you're not going to have generally, going out and just getting like ijazat. And I mean, anybody nowadays can get an ijazah from any sheikh. Anybody. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I was invited to sit down with a sheikh, Sheikh Tawajiri, going through al-Muwatta, Imam Malik. And then when I asked the students, because it was one of his students invited me to this majlis to get the ijazah. I said, so what are we going to do? We're going to be memorizing it and he's going to be teaching it. He said, no. He's just going to read it and we're going to listen. So I said, he's going to read it and we're going to listen. And he's going to give us an ijazah and the muwatta. He said, yeah. I said, I don't want it. And I'm not going. And I refused. I didn't go because I was like, that's just, what is that? I'm not, and obviously we're not sitting here studying just to have these types of pieces of paper that we can come back and show the people and say, hey, look, I have this ijazah from this chair. Because they especially in Saudi Arabia, these ijazat are given out like candy, to children, and Allah musta'an. So it's not, it doesn't show a person that's actually worked. So what we look at the person and his characteristics and his daily habits. Because students of knowledge and people who are continuing, because it's not what you used to be, it's what you are. Nobody cares that you used to be a student of knowledge. It's all that matters nowadays is what you're doing now. What you're doing today, what you did today, and what you're continuing to do today. That's all that matters. What you did yesterday, what you did a week ago, what you did a month ago, that does not matter. If you lived the life of a student of knowledge 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that doesn't matter. That doesn't make you a student of knowledge today. There's certain habits and certain, just a lifestyle that a student of knowledge has that, that you'll know when you see that person. Certain questions that you can ask the person to know that this person is continuing that journey of studying, of seeking knowledge. And then that way you can differentiate between a person who's just talking and a person who's actually serious about what he's doing. So the first thing that we'll talk about is like Salat al-Fajr. All right. For one, a student of knowledge is not going to be sleeping, past the time of Salat al-Fajr. Accidents happen, people stay up late, and something happens where the alarm doesn't go off or they don't hear it, or somebody that was supposed to wake them up didn't wake them up. It's happened to the Prophet ﷺ. But it's not a habit. It's not something that becomes a habit of that person waking up and seeing the sun in their face on a daily basis. So if that's the type of person, and that person is not serious, because obviously, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about the person, رَجُلَ الَّذِي نَامَ حَتَّى يُصْبِحْ, the man that slept until the morning came, and the isbah is, once you reach the time of Fajr. So actually the time of Salat al-Fajr is called asbahta, and that's when you start with the adhkar al-sabah. So it doesn't mean that he slept until the sun was in his face, but he slept all the way up until the time of the Salat al-Fajr. He said, فَذَاكَ الَّذِي بَالَ شَيْطَانُ فِي أُذُنَيْهِ. So the Prophet ﷺ said that's the one that shaitan is urinated in his ears. So this is not, obviously the person that wakes up after, at this time is going to wake up lazy. He's going to wake up not really taking anything seriously. For a person to wake up and be serious, he needs to wake up and start his day. However that day starts. I mean, certain people, they might want to pray witr. They get up and they pray witr, and that gets them going. And then or some people, they just wake up. They might get a cup of tea or some coffee and start reading Quran before Fajr to get their mind going and get their, just get, get everything, just get woken up and get ready for the salat. And that's one of the main signs that you see. The sheikh, whenever I remember with the sheikh, I always used to see him, like especially in Mecca. If you go to Salat al-Fajr, he's always in the front row reading the Quran. Always. He's always sitting down in the front row reading the Quran. And the same thing when he was in Damaj and he was teaching, and when he was, when all the students were in Damaj. If you go to like Damaj back in the days, after Salat al-Fajr, it is like a football stadium full of people. Everybody's just reading everything. You got people, the majority of the people are memorizing the Quran or reading the Quran or reviewing the Quran, and you got other people, they might be reviewing other things. Like they might read the Quran a little bit, then they start reading like different matun, something that he's memorizing. But everybody's like it's just so many people there, so many voices. You can't even hear what you're reading. You have to, one brother that I know, he used to have earplugs. He had the earplugs sent from Britain. That's the only way that he could actually hear himself. So it's just you got to do what you got to do. Wear a hoodie, plug your ears up, or some people will go on top of the masjid or go outside, but to have that actual benefit of sitting in the masjid and reading, it's like a football stadium in there. And the majority of the people, like for example, the student knowledge with the Adhkar al-Sabah. So obviously after Salat al-Fajr, he's not just going to get up and just leave. He's going to get up, after the Salat, he's going to sit there and do the Adhkar for a bit. Now, obviously, if a person's busy, he might do the adhkar in his, on his way back to his house to get ready for work if he's got to go to work or something, if he works during the day. So, that, there are exceptions. But I'm just saying in general, especially if the person is an imam in a masjid, he'll be in, he's going to sit there after Fajr, he's going to do the adhkar, and he'll sit there for a while. Just like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he used to stay in the same place that he prayed Fajr up until the time of Shuruq, once the sun rose, then he'd stand up and he'd pray 2 rak'ahs, and then he'd go about his day. 2 or 4, whatever he prayed. But he would sit there doing adhkar all the way up until the sun rose. So this is just this is one of the main characteristics. Now, obviously, some people, they might not do the adhkar, sit there with adhkar, but he does the adhkar, and then he'll open up a mushaf and start reading. So you always see that the students of knowledge are always busy with the Quran after Fajr. Again, there's exceptions to the rules, but we're talking about the general people. So you always see, like, and this is a habit of always constantly, either the person's reviewing something from the Quran, he's memorizing something from the Quran, he's just reading the Quran, whatever the case may be. The first priority every single day after Fajr is that you get started with the Quran. Sometimes what I used to do is I would read the Quran before Fajr, and then after Fajr I'll start with the matun, because that way I can go ahead and get the Quran in early and quiet, in peace and quiet, because in Damaj, like I said, Damaj is very loud in the masjid. It's very loud. Well, it was very loud along this time. Back in those days, and it was just so many people in the masjid after Fajr reading. So I would try to read, sometimes I even go out to the desert and just read out in the desert, but with the point that don't go back to your bed, whatever you do. So that's number one. And the other characteristic is that you see with the students of knowledge is that they always have something that they're doing. There's always a book that he's reading, and it's always going to be in a specific science that he's trying to go over. Either he's revising it, or he's going deeper into it, or maybe he's still, in the early stages of Talib al-Ilm, and he's trying to get familiar with that science at the time, so he starts to read books about it. So he's always going to have a book with him that he's reading, and it's always going to be about a specific science. And, and generally that's all he's going to talk about for that period of time that he's focusing on that science. So every single conversation that he gets into he'll turn it to that science so he can revise, because that's how you revise. You get in discussions about the things that you're studying. So that's why whenever you're studying a certain science and you're focusing on something, like let's say that you're focusing on like Mustalah Hadith or Usul al-Fiqh or whatever the case may be, whatever science you're focusing in, you try to be around people that are also doing the same thing. So that way they have the same mindset as you. If you're sitting around and you're studying like Usul al-Fiqh, and you have your other friend, he's focusing more on Mustalah Hadith, then the discussions they might overlap at points because there are abwab of usul al-fiqh that deal with mustalah hadith. But the thing is that the majority of the time he's going to be trying to talk about what he's learning in mustalah hadith, and you're trying to talk about what you're learning in usul al-fiqh, and that's not how you revise. So because when you have friends, close companions that study the same thing, they're also reading other books that you're not reading. And they might have a different understanding than you have because he might be going back and revising that book, whereas you're studying the book for the first time. And he's already studied it before, and he might even study the book after it, but he wanted to come back and redo it, and go through the series again so he could revise everything. So he might have a deeper understanding than you have. So you sitting down with that person and discussing with him, it opens up doors of understanding that you wouldn't have had just sitting in the class. You wouldn't have had it because now you get his experience. Not only that, because especially if he's certain explanations he's gone through, so he could tell you what are the good points about each explanation. Because like anything, any science, that there are main books that you study, and from those main books there are a lot of explanations of that main book. So like for example, let's say that you're studying usul al-fiqh. So you're going to start off with al-waraqat, right? Whether you're memorizing the nazm al-waraqat, or if you're just memorizing the actual metin as it is, the nathar. All right. So whatever the case may be, there's a lot of different explanations. So from the nazm al-waraqat, you have the explanation of Shaykh Uthaymeen. From the nathar, you have the explanation of Abdullah al-Fawzan. And these are like the more of our time. These were the most popular ones back in the days. And then you just have so many other people have done them now. Like Shithri has Sa'd al-Shithri has an explanation. You have older explanations. You have newer explanations. So many. I'd have to sit here and make a list of all the ones that I have because I don't have the books in front of me right now. So there's just so many. So many different explanations of it. So and then also the books after that. So the point is that you might be sitting with a person who's read a lot of other books that you haven't read and understood them, whereas you're struggling to understand certain issues. So he can sit down and help you, and you can discuss those things with him. So you always have to have that type of companion because the Talib al-Ilm is always going to try to talk about the stuff that he's doing right now, and the Talib al-Ilm is always focusing on something right now. It's always something going on in his life that he's focusing on right now. Whatever it is, whether it's al-aqidah, whether it's usul al-fiqh, whether it's fara'id, whether it's mustalah hadith, whether it's usul al-tafsir, whether it's nahu, whether it's sarf, whether it's balagha, whatever it is that student of knowledge or fiqh, I forgot to mention fiqh, he's always got something going on right now. And you're always going to see him with the metin that he's memorizing and the explanation that he's reading. Always. And he's gonna be with these books everywhere he goes. If he gets in the car, he's got the books with him. He goes to the restaurant, he's got the books with him. If he goes to the masjid, he's got the books with him. So and back in the days, you had we pray dhuhr, and there's like a little small period, there's a little gap before the sheikh, because the sheikh he's gonna do his adhkar, and he's gonna he might pray the sunnah in the masjid. He might if he knows he's gonna be busy, if not he'll pray in his house. But generally the sheikh goes straight to the maktab. He goes straight to the library after the lesson. So he stays busy. I mean, I honestly, I never, I've only seen him eat once in my life, and it was when we ate in his house in Mecca, Allah yahfadhu. And I don't even I've never, other than that, I've never seen him eat. So he's just always busy. So there's like this little period of time, this gap of time before he goes up and starts teaching. The student knowledge is going to take out that method and start memorizing. Whatever he's memorizing at that time, he's going to focus and just sit there and memorize. Obviously, if back in those days, if it was the Dars in Bukhari, then most of the students have Bukhari out and they're memorizing the hadith in Bukhari before the sheikh gets up to the Qursi and starts asking the people to stand up and recite the hadith. So I mean, he's always got something. The students of hadith, you're always going to see them go to the especially the durus. If there's durus, with Bukhari, you're going to see them go with they're either going to have like Taqrib al-Tahdhib, or they're going to have a Nihaya, Ibn Athir. They're going to have any of these types of books, Taqrib al-Tahdhib obviously for the Rijal, and they're always going to have notebooks with them. Student of knowledge is always buying notebooks. I have so many notebooks around here, it's not even funny. So the notebook thing is like a very telltale sign, I guess you could say. But the main thing is, like I said, he's always got something going. So you're always gonna know what that person is doing. All you got to do is just look in his hands. So if we knew, like for example, yeah, I see one of the brothers I'm close to, he's carrying around Bulugh al-Maram. I don't have to ask him what he's doing these days. Every time I see him, how many times a day, and he's got Bulugh al-Maram in his hands. Do I have to sit down and ask him, hey, are you memorizing Bulugh al-Maram? You know what he's doing. Because he's carrying it around every single day. Everywhere he goes, he's got Bulugh al-Maram with him. The same thing. You see, like another guy might be memorizing Kitab al-Tawheed. So everywhere he goes, he's got Kitab al-Tawheed in his pocket. So if he's waiting on food, if he's in a car, if he's waiting, between the adhan and the iqama, he's going to pull the Kitab al-Tawheed out of his pocket. He's going to start memorizing. And he's always going to have the time for a revision, and he'll take that time to sit back and revise all the stuff that he's memorized. So that's the main thing. Even if there are no durus, that's no excuse. A student of knowledge always has something. He's always has something that he's doing, because there's always something deeper to go into. So usul al-fiqh, you start off with al-waraqat, tayyib, you got that. And now you come back and you want to do usul al-fiqh again, but you want to go further. So now you're going to start focusing on like things like mudhakkira fi usul al-fiqh li-Shanqiti, or you start thinking, doing like, maybe one of the bigger matun like Maraq al-Sa'ud, or something like that. So, and then you're going to start reading explanations of that. You start memorizing that. For the students of Nahu, you see him like with Ajrumiyah. Everywhere he goes, he's got the matan of Al-Ajrumiyah. And he's got one of the explanations, whether it's Tuhfat al-Saniyah, Tuhfat al-Wasabiyah, the Sharh of Al-Ajrumiyah, Shaykh Udaymin, or Al-Makudi, or Khalid al-Azhari, or Al-Faqihi, or any of the Sharrah, of Al-Ajrumiyah. He's going to have one of those books with him all the time, with the matan in his pocket. And every time that he gets the opportunity, he's going to take the matan out, he's going to memorize it. And whenever he's, doesn't feel like memorizing, he's going to take the book out and he's going to read it. And he's going to make notes in the book. And he's going to like underline stuff in the book that he needs to go back home later on and write in a notebook and memorize. So if you don't see him with the matan, you're going to see him with the notebook memorizing the ta'rifat of Nahu. And the same thing when he moves up and he goes to like Qatar Nada, or he goes to, for example, like Alfiyah, and he starts to memorize Alfiyah. Everywhere he goes, he's going to have Alfiyah. Everywhere he goes, he's going to have one of the 2 volumes of Ibn Aqil. And he's going to be going through the Ibn Aqil. He's going to be looking at the Tahqiq of Muhammad Muhyiddin and going over the I'rab of the Nazm of Alfiyah, and then looking at the Ash'ar and the Shawahid al-Shi'riyah and going over those and doing the I'rab of those. And then, writing down all the ta'rifat al-Za'ida, that he didn't get in the previous books. He's going to be writing them down in the notebook. He's going to be memorizing the notebook. This is it, and this is the, so you're always going to see that person busy with something. So if you go to a student of knowledge and you say, so what are you doing these days? What are you busy with? I mean, he should have a very detailed answer. What he's memorizing, what he's revising, what he's reading, what he's, even to the point where if you ask him, like, how many times do you read this a day to memorize it, he should have a clear answer. If a person's like, I keep that knowledge, no, it's because the thing is like, a lot of people, they try to play that humble card. And this is not even about being humble, especially when you're around students of knowledge. Everybody's doing everything. The majority of the things that, like, especially like in the West, the majority of things that the people are doing are like real, elementary anyway. So there's nothing to be arrogant about. Like you're trying to hide the fact that you're memorizing Usul al-Thalatha. The children memorize Usul al-Thalatha. I mean, that's not, I'm not saying that's a great thing. It's a good book. It's a great book. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of the people that are not doing anything, they try to play that humble card. They just try to sit in there. But, a real student of knowledge is busy with knowledge. He loves to talk about it. And it's not about being arrogant. It's not about showing off. Some of the people might think that. And they think that, oh, he's just showing off. No, it's just when you're busy with something all day long, you love to talk about it. Because you love to get feedback and you love to, like, have discussions. Because, like I said, you don't know who you're talking to. You could get in a discussion with one of the bigger students. You don't know who he is because you just heard his name, but you don't know who he is by face. And then he asks you what you're doing these days, and you start answering, and then he can, give you guidance and give you advice and things like that. You don't know who you're talking to, so that humble card is always generally from a person who's not doing anything. So like the person who's lazy about memorization of the Quran, when you go up to him and you say, how much Quran have you memorized? And he'll say, oh, that's between me and Allah. Yeah, that means he's not doing anything. That means he's not doing anything, because anybody who's very, very serious about the memorization of the Quran, they'll tell you exactly the last ayat that they memorized, right where they stopped. They know, because they're busy with it all the time. So I mean, if anything that you love, it's just like the Sheikh used to say that all the time. He said, yeah, ikhwa, he said, like a person and the things that he loves by the things that busy him all the time. And even when he's talking, he's busy talking about those things because he loves it so much. So when he's wrapped up in studying the ilm al-hadith and memorizing, like, let's say that, okay, let's go to the, ilm al-hadith. So he starts off with like al-Baykuniyah. So now he's going to be memorizing al-Baykuniyah. He's going to have probably the sharh, the explanation of Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. He's going to be reading that. And maybe might have one of the shuruh of one of the students from Damaj, like Sheikh Turki al-Abidini. He did a very, very nice, good sharh of al-Baykuniyah. So he might have one of those shuruh. Whatever he's going through, he's going to have that book with him all the time. He's going to have the metin with him all the time. And he's going to be talking about the science of hadith in every conversation. All right, when he goes up the ladder, he goes to Nuzhat another, he's going to be doing the same thing. If he memorizes the metin, Nukhbat al-Fikr, all right, and that's the case. If not, some people, they might skip the metin and just say, like, okay, I'm just going to memorize Alfiyat al-Suyuti, or I'll just memorize Alfiyat al-Iraqi. Whatever the case may be, if he memorizes Alfiyat al-Iraqi, or Alfiyat al-Suyuti, you're going to see him with the sharh, the explanation of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Adam. One of those 2 volumes of that sharh, everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, he's going to be reading through that sharh, he's going to be marking things down, things that he needs to write in a notebook. If he's doing the sharh of al-Iraqi, then he's going to be focusing on trying to read Fath al-Mughith, the Sakhawi. And that book is going to become his whole life, his whole existence. And that's all he's going to talk about, because it's a huge book. It's a huge explanation. It's probably the best explanation of all the books of Mustalah Hadith. That's like the king, that's like the final, once you sit down with Fath al-Mughith, you're good to go. If you understood it and you gave it its rights, and you see, that's all he's going to talk about. So it's not that, like I said, it's not about arrogance. It's not about showing off. It's just the fact that when you're busy with stuff like that all the time, that's all you want to talk about. It's your love. It's your passion. Just like if you were to sit down and talk with a person who loves memorizing statistics in sports, you wouldn't call him arrogant because all he wants to do is tell you all the different statistics. And he's not humble. What are you gonna say? He's not humble because he doesn't want to hide what he's memorized and all the stuff, because he's passionate about it, right? Even though it's useless, but he's passionate about it, right? But then, like with the students of knowledge, the same thing. When you're passionate about something, and then people want to say, oh, he's arrogant or he wants to show off. No, that's not the case. Well, they just don't know what the traits of a real student of knowledge are. So a student of knowledge, when he's busy with something, that's all he wants to talk about. If the conversation is not about that, if he can't turn it to that, he's going to get up and go. He's going to get up and leave. He's probably not going to stay in the conversation because he's going to start to lose focus. And it becomes boring to him because he's not focusing on that at that time. And also because if you stay in the conversations with people who are talking about something that you're not doing at the time, it could start to entice you to like leave what you're doing, because you might be doing something like, let's say, for example, you're trying to focus on Nahu because you're trying to really get past like you've done Al-Ajrumiyah, you memorized it, but you kind of hit that like roadblock. So when you look at like the explanations of Alfiya, you're like, wow, man, this is way too difficult. I can't do this. It's because it's a big jump from Al-Ajrumiyah to Alfiya, huge jump. And Qatar doesn't do much to like, pad that jump too much, because Qatar is also a big jump from Al-Ajrumiyah. So he'll be busy with Mutammima. He's going to be busy with Al-Mutammima. And now, if he's sitting down, like trying to focus on Mutammima so he can get ready to get to Alfiya, and now you're talking about the science of Hadith, and he gets interested in it, the best thing for him to do is to get up and leave. Because if he gets too interested in the conversation, it might entice him to like leave what he's doing to go and study Ilm al-Hadith because what he heard was so cool. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, that's so cool. So that's another problem among students of knowledge, is just that kid in the candy store mentality, where you just want to like have everything. You want to take, everything and just put it in your bag at once. And, you got to be very, very patient, and just like really, really just take it one step at a time. Just focus on the thing that you're doing at that time and stay busy with that. So if you're busy with nahu becomes your whole life. It becomes your whole life. Every conversation that you get into, if somebody used to come to my house, I'd ask them about the Arab of different things. I say, well, give me the Arab of this, give me the Arab of this, It becomes your whole life. You start asking questions about it, you start having discussions about it, and that's the main sign of a student of knowledge. If the person is not like that, you don't see him with the book. Like if you were to look at him on a daily basis and you couldn't tell what he's doing, you know what I'm saying? You could, from the books he's carrying, from the things that he's talking about, you could not tell. Because a real student of knowledge, you don't have to ask him what he's doing. All you got to do is listen to him talk and look at the books that he has with him every day. And that's it. You know what he's about. You know what he's going to be, you know what he's doing. That's it. It's done. You don't have to ask him. So if you have to like go up and ask the person, like, what are you doing? As a student of knowledge, then that person's not serious. That's not a serious person. And they can go around and try to play that humble card all they want, but nah, that's all the students of knowledge. You'll know what they're busy with because they're going to have that book with them all the time. They don't want to be caught outside in a doctor's office, on a bus, or any place without a book, and then they got to sit there and stare at the window and look at people. Nah, they're going to have a book with them. There's something that they're memorizing. Be standing at the bus stop memorizing something at the bus stop. Before the bus comes. As soon as the bus comes, get on the bus and open up the book and start reading about what I was just memorizing. That's it. I mean, that's a student of knowledge. So those characteristics of constantly being like, Salat al-Fajr, Salat al-Maghrib, you have those adhkar. So you see like the person is constantly focusing on trying to get the adhkar in at those times. Not being very, very talkative at night, not trying to like sit up and drink tea and hang out, drink tea or coffee and hang out at night. That's another characteristic. But the main characteristic is that what I've just been talking about for the last 20 something minutes. That characteristic of like just having the books and constantly just talking about that subject matter, that is the main characteristic of a real student of knowledge, because he's always going to be busy with something. I don't care what he studied. I don't care if he studied every single book that there is to study. He studied all the major books of Usul al-Fiqh, all the major books of, of course, Tawheed, I don't mention that because that's a given. You understand? That's a given. Like to study books like, Usul al-Thalatha, Kitab al-Tawheed, Kashf al-Shubat, that's a given. And to study the books that you need to study for Aqidah, like Al-Qawaid al-Mufla, Al-Wasatiyya, or Tahawiyya, that's a given. So I'm talking about the other sciences that, that aren't like a given, So like Usul al-Fiqh, Al-Fara'id, or fiqh itself, or mustalah hadith, whatever he's focusing on, you're going to know it. You're going to know it by his conversation, the books that he has, everything. That is going to take over his life. And if he's done all that, he's done all the usul al-fiqh, he's done all the aqidah, he's done all that, then he's going to have something like Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari. So you're going to see him everywhere he goes. He's got Bukhari with him. He's going to be reading through Bukhari. He's going to be, doing stuff in Bukhari. Or he's going to be sitting at home taking notes out of Fath al-Bari. Or if he's, going through the Majmu' al-Fatawa, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. See, these types of books, like the bigger books, you're not going to see him carrying those books around. Because obviously, like the bigger books like Fath al-Bari, the Majmu' al-Fatawa, and these things, you keep those books in the house. You don't take those books out. Because if you lose one of those books, it's not, it's not easily replaceable. It's not like Ibn Aqil and stuff like that. It's a 2-volume book that I can just buy it again. It's replaceable. But if you got like a 15-volume book and you lose one, so these types of books are not going to be taken out the house. He's not going to be sitting there taking a volume of a Tafsir al-Tabari out of his house if he's focusing on tafsir. But what he will be focusing on is he'll have like, for example, he'll have the tafsir that he's reading. Like if he's going through Ibn Kathir or he's going through a Qurtubi or a Tabari, he'll have that tafsir that he's reading at the house and he's taking notes. But at the time that he's doing tafsir, you're going to find him that he's probably a lot stronger with the revision of the Quran. So he's going to have the Mus'haf everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, he's going to have the Mus'haf. He's going to be revising the Quran and like trying to read the Quran as much as possible. And he'll probably have a notebook or have like some of these books like, the Mukhtasarat that he's trying to memorize. Like maybe like Gharib al-Quran, Ibn Qutayba, or, back in the old days, they used to memorize from Tafsir al-Jalalain, like this, some type of mukhtasar that he's trying to memorize just the basic tafsir. Staying, of course, with tafsir al-Jalalain, you want to stay away from the Asma wa Sifat, but just the ma'ani, like the meanings of the words and stuff like that. So you have him, you see him everywhere he goes, he's got that with him. He's got like, one of those books with him, and he might be memorizing from, or he's got his notebook. But whatever the case may be, he's going to have something with him, and you're going to know what he's doing. You're going to know if he's busy with Bukhari, he's going to have Bukhari everywhere he goes. Everywhere he's going, he's going to have the one volume. When he goes home, he's going to be reading the Fath al-Bari. And he's going to probably, if he's not in a place where there are durus, he'll be sitting down with the durus from one of the ulama, Sheikh, and he'll sit down with Sheikh Abdul Mahsan's old durus al-Bukhari or whatever, Sheikh al-Uthaymeen's durus al-Bukhari. Obviously, if he's more inclined towards like the ilm al-hadith, he's going to focus on the durus of like somebody like Sheikh Abdul Mahsan. Because Sheikh Abdul Mahsan is more hadithi, more, he's a muhaddith. Whereas like Sheikh al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, would focus more on the fiqh. So, but I mean, whatever the case may be, you'll know. I mean, that's the sign. Like, you look at the person for like 3 days and you know what he's busy doing. And you're going to see the same books with him almost every day. You're going to see it. Everywhere he goes, he's going to have the same books with him. Everywhere he goes, he's going to be talking about the same thing. every time. Subhanallah. And that's just the way it goes. If you see a person who's sitting there talking about he's a student of knowledge and all this, and he's not like that, he doesn't fit that characteristic, and so, I don't do that because I'm trying to stay humble. Nah, that dude ain't serious. Allahumma stan. Inshallah, that should be enough. I mean, as far as like the signs, that should be sufficient, inshallah, for the people to know. The passionate, real talib from the non-passionate faker. Allahumma stan. Wa ilahuna subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.